Hey everybody, Jay Schlansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Notorious Scoundrels, a Star Wars Legion podcast bringing you the latest news, general perspective, and competitive discussion.
Hello and welcome back to the Notorious Scoundrels podcast. I'm here with Jay and Mike. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey.
Hey.
We're here to talk some Legion, yeah?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's do it.
Yeah. I'm excited. We are finally getting what I believe is officially called leafing season around here.
Leafing season?
Yeah,
I
have you
think
not
you
heard of
mean
that?
fall. I think you mean fall.
No,
right?
I do mean fall, but there's an activity that people call leafing where they drive around and look at trees that are like turning colors.
Oh, yeah. We do that up here a lot. So we have the Adirondacks, and that's a big deal. Like everybody drives up there to see them in the mountains.
I'm going to look this up because
I'm looking it up
probably
right
believe
now.
me.
And apparently it's not leafing, it is leaf peeping.
Leaf peeping?
That's what it says.
Well, I don't like
sounds
that as
way
much.
different than what...
That's what Wikipedia says. Leaf peeping is an informal term in the United States and Canada for the activity in which people travel to view and photograph the fall foliage in areas where leaves change colors in autumn.
Leaf peeping.
Leaf peeping.
I'm gonna stick with leafing because leaf peeping sounds like the thing that Marty's dad was doing in Back to the Future.
Yeah. When you first said it, what I thought you meant was like that thing where you drive in your car and there's a big pile of leaves like that are encroaching into the road, and then you kind of like get near it so it all blows up. That's what I thought you meant, leafing. Which you're not really supposed to do because kids hide in those, so you gotta be careful.
Yeah, you should absolutely not do that as somebody that has kids that
It's a
hides
whole
in leaf
thing.
piles.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
You don't drive through them. You drive near them to blow the leaves, but it's still bad either way.
You shouldn't really drive near them either. Yeah, actually.
Well, all right, Kyle.
I mean,
Well,
I'm just saying, look, I got kids. There's a lot of kids on my street. Sometimes people drive really fast down the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Wait, people drive fast on your street?
Yeah, I know I live on a cul-de-sac. It's long enough that like sometimes it's usually like, not people that live on the street, but like delivery drivers and stuff like that. But
I just yeah. Okay. All right.
yeah, we actually, yeah. Anyway,
They just like go to the end of the
cul
cul-de-sac and get ramped into the moon. Like where they go?
Yeah, that's what I'm having a hard
Yeah.
time. Like I've been to his house. Like it's not someplace that I think you would drive over like 15 miles an hour.
Not typically, but
He's just trying to sell this whole leafing thing. Let him do it.
Anyway, trees are changing color. It's pretty. Let's talk about Legion.
Whoa. Wait. I have some housekeeping. I have housekeeping.
Okay, my bad.
That's okay. First thing I'd like to say is actually about this podcast and Legion. Our boy Mike here is going to be joining us weekly from now on. So very excited to have Mike back. We're still going to do some of the rotation with the Tims and bring them in. But Mike will be our steady third from now on. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, you won't see less of the Tims, just more of the mic.
Just more of the mic. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just I think it's a great thing, and for you guys listening, I think it's just good to have a third voice. There's something about threes in like this type of media, like talking and like hot taking and stuff, like having three distinct like thoughts on something. It just feels better because then it's not so like
three.
Yeah, it's not so binary and like black and white. So yeah, so very happy to have Mike back. So Mike, everybody.
Be back.
Yeah.
Hey.
Scoundrels are back. And second for housekeeping, if you haven't had a chance, we started a really amazing, if I don't say so myself, RPG podcast called Iron and Tentacles. It's like a Cthulhu pulp World War II RPG podcast. We this week, technically it's episode 3, but it's the second in the like actual campaign. With the first one was more like intro to the game mechanics and stuff like that. It's really heating up. I'm very excited with where it's going. We've got a pretty stellar cast. That it's been a ton of fun doing it with everybody. And you know, we've got Ben and Tim from the Stabcast, Keegan from Legion 99's on there, Evan from the Fifth Trooper, and then AJST's wife Louisa is actually on it. And so it's a great cast, a good bunch of people, and we've been having a ton of fun. So really check it out. It's on all the podcast things, Iron and Tentacles. So give it a listen, and yeah, I'm just super excited. I mean, these guys know it's something I've been wanting to do since we started doing the Fifth Trooper was an RPG podcast, and this one's actually it's working. And I'm getting them to like come to the sessions, and we're getting recordings in, and so I'm just really jacked about it. So please go check it out. I'm DMing the whole thing, which is fun, and I actually like that better than playing. I really like being the GM.
I am similarly with you. When I play D&D, it's tough to not be the DM these days.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's where my because as a player, like I'm too creative, where I try to like come up with insane stuff as a player, and like I always have to hear no, you know, you know, even though like, you know, and this sort of stuff, it's supposed to be like a yes and thing, but it's like it's a lot of no, because just my creativity, like I just like am like, and then what I want to do is flick it with my sword in such a way that you know what I mean, and the GM's like, dude, please, you're killing me.
Just roll the dice, Jay.
Yeah. But as the GM, right, I get to come up with all the creative stuff. So that's it. Kind of like it kind of like sates that thirst a little bit. So yeah. So anyways, very exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. Yeah, I used to feel that way, and now it's mostly just like a time thing. I'm sure there will be a point in my life again where I'm like, hey, I want to DM some D&D or something.
Yeah.
And it was great. You know, it was super fun before I had kids, just to come up with all the stuff. And
yeah,
but now
Rachel's
like...
totally on to the fact that I'm having fun. You know, like I was selling it as a work thing. No. You know, like no, I gotta record this podcast for 5 hours. Like it's gonna suck. I like dancing on my way out to the. And then she's like, I know you're having fun. Well, she's like, she's friends with Louisa, so she hears about all the fun. You know, so like, so I'm like, oh no, she's on to me.
The game is up.
Yeah, so now it's like a trade-off. All right, you could go get your nails done while I'm doing this. Like, and I don't. I'm sorry. Let me clarify that for everybody listening. That's not like that's what she likes to do. I'm not. You know,
you're not like sentencing her to some.
No. Yeah. That's what she wants to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, I gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Legion.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we got a couple topics today, and these kind of stem from our own personal experiences recently. Mike, of course, went to Crucible, which you won.
I did. Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I would like for you to sell me on Yoda, but not right now, because we have 2 more things first. The first is just I think it'd be good to have a discussion about tie breaks and how the new tie break system has been interacting with the old battle cards, because draws have become, I mean, draws are like a real thing that are possible. And for whatever reason, you know, we've had this rule for what, 7, 8 months now. And just recently, I feel like it's kind of coming to light how many challenges there are with like the current objectives we have and how the new draw rule works. So I think it'd be nice to have some conversations about that. And then we're also going to talk about Wookiees, because Wookiees. Wookiees. But first, the draw rule. So, what are your guys' thoughts on? I'm sure we had a discussion on this months ago, but after playing with it for whatever this is now 8 months, what are your thoughts on how tie breaks work now in Legion?
So I think that there are a couple fundamental points that are separate but maybe equally important. The first is I think draws are okay to have within a rule set. I think when you have a draw, it should be. I don't know. I think that is an okay thing to have. Like other games have draws. I think it should be okay to draw. I think the way that Legion is presently set up is that the draw is actually affecting a lot of game state stuff. Or game state stuff is affecting the outcome, the possible outcome of a draw. And there are several, like for instance, in a setting where you're playing effectively a single elimination, like top 8, and what happens when someone draws, that actually isn't spelled out in the rules right now at all. Like there's just it Crucible, it happened twice. We rolled a die. The first time it didn't matter because both people that drew ended up making the cut. But then they got repaired and they played effectively the same game and they drew again. And that was a single elimination. And the only way, I mean, they were aware that if they drew again, that a die would be rolled to determine the outcome of the game. It was effectively like flipping a coin. But that is not in the tournament regulations at all. That was the solution that Jordan came up with on the fly, and I think it was a good decision in the moment. But like I think the fact that so I think A, there's that problem. B, I think the draw issue also has some implications based on like how the battle deck operates presently, in that there are several objectives that you just don't want to put in your battle deck until you like hit 800 and then you're in a draw situation. These objectives are often like sabotage the moisture evaporators, hostage exchange. There's a few others, but those are I think the two big ones that probably often go to ties the most.
I would say there are some that unexpectedly go to ties a lot.
For sure.
Breakthrough.
Yep.
When you have the same number of activations, recover. If particularly on like an open table where the middle box is difficult to access. Yeah. I mean, Legion objectives were designed to be close. Is the bottom line.
And I think one of the things that has changed with the introduction of the draw system, or I'm going to call it a draw system, lack of a better term, is that in all of these scenarios previously, an attacker and defender was essentially defined at the start of the game. We no longer have that kind of dichotomy if the lists are like tied and even. So it creates this really weird game state where neither player really wants to engage, but is like sort of kind of trying to kill something, but is only kind of like half-heartedly doing it, because if they lose a unit in the it's like both players are red on VAPs. It's like a really weird.
No, it's like both players are blue on VAPs.
Blue on VAPs. Sorry, that's what I meant. And like they're like trying to play cagely, but neither of them really wants to interact with the other. And that was what happened in both of these top 8 games at Crucible, was that like they were both playing like really defensive gunline lists. And it was, they were basically putting sniper shots into each other all game. And when one person like stepped up to like take that lethal attack, the other person stepped back. Right. And I think the new draw system sets up this very awkward situation for a lot of the battle cards that presently exist in the game. And to your point, Kyle, I think it also can happen unexpectedly in that regard as well. Those are my topical thoughts without getting like into the like hows and the whys and potentially how to fix it.
So let me ask you a question around that. So because there's no rule, but let's say that more TOs take on the rule of the die roll, right? Do
So
you do you see the potential of players being more aggressive to take the agency away from the random roll, or do you see it still being a very passive kind of game like that?
so first of all, just a quick question, because this
Mhm.
also happened at LSO in the final,
Mhm.
where there was a possibility of a draw because both players were 800 and they
Yep.
ended up on hostage, which is one of those objectives that often
Yep.
draws. And I think they looked, basically they were like, so what happens? You know, both players, this was two Florida players actually.
Sure.
Um
Geez,
it
the
was
Florida
yeah, it
men
was
causing all the problems.
Austin and Smiley Smile. And basically they're like, we want to know how this is, you know, who's gonna win this game if we draw. And they looked it up, and at least, you know, I don't know if it was in the tournament regs or somewhere else, but they basically discovered that it was SOS. It would go to the tournament, you know, because their record would be each whatever, you know, 2-0-1, and then it would go to the tournament SOS, because they would each have the same record. So they determined before the game who
Right.
had the higher SOS, and I think in that case it was his actual name is Michael, but Smiley Smile is what he is in Game Uplink.
So
Um,
I have two things to say about that. The
okay.
first is, if that rule exists and I missed it, sorry. However, we looked into this during the tournament. If that rule does exist, and these guys actually had identical SOSs.
Okay, so also not a solution in that
It was
situation.
not a solution
Um,
in the situation we were in. I
it's also a
think
crappy way to determine that if it is like,
I mean
but that's a
I
whole nother separate
that's a whole
conversation.
nother separate thing. I
Yeah.
think it at
I
least
mean,
sets the terms of the engagement
yeah.
at a bare minimum,
Well, and
which is I think that's really
it's
all I
important
would.
for players to have roles going into the
Yep.
game.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to know going into the game who's going to win if there was a tie. Because the good part about that game is that was a situation where there could have been uncertainty about what happens if they draw, and they resolved it as the game started, and it ended up playing out like a much more traditional, like, you know, Austin knew that if they drew, that he would lose, so he was really aggressive, and it ended up playing out more like a traditional game with like a clear tiebreak structure, because they knew in advance who would actually
Right.
win if they drew. Um, so I think there's a couple things. The first is, as you mentioned, Mike, I think, and one of the things I don't, and I apologize if this is an X-Wing comment that I'm porting over to Legion, because I know this sort of was a discussion also in X-Wing with the changes. I seem to recall a comment basically where the motivation for making draws possible is that if a draw was essentially a loss for both players, then both players would go into aggressive mode, and that was like a desirable thing. First of all, I think we could have a completely third separate discussion about whether that sort of state is actually desirable or fun. But I also think it's a fallacy, because what you described, Mike, is also what I've seen, where it's almost like two boxers in a ring that are both kind of afraid to like get into punching distance. So they just kind of dance around each other the whole time. And like that's what I've observed in games where there's a drop possibility. I had a game actually at the Game Castle Store tournament where we ended up on VAPS and we were both at 800, and my opponent basically just like ran away to a corner, and I chased him all the way across the table, literally all the way across the table. And he was playing that Shadow Collective list with all the dodges.
You can't kill
So
anything in that
it was
list.
really hard to kill anything. I managed to kill something with a very well supported lucky Z6 shot on turn 6. But it was entirely possible that we go through that entire game, and like despite my best efforts, you know, I went straight towards him. I was attacking constantly, like nothing dies. And I don't know why he played that way in that situation. It's possible too, you know, this is a whole nother can of worms, but it's possible you get in a situation where like if a draw because of the tournament structure functionally results in a loss for both players, that outcome is more acceptable to one player than it is to another. And therefore you get a situation where like one player can basically choose to not interact to like cause both players to lose, and that's a really crappy situation too. So
I think to that point as well, it also sets up the potential to like, you know, in a lot of the tournaments that were presently being run, there is a situation where a lot of like LVO this year was you could drop a game, right?
Yep.
However, if all of the X and O's at the end of the round, the like second to last round, or in the last round, I think all draw. I think there's a situation where that's like there's like weird situations where that sets it up so that like they all just like they're like, okay, we all make the cut.
And then there are some X and ones that even though they would have expected to be able to go X and one and make it to the next day, they actually don't.
They actually
That would
didn't
be
have
too many
any
players.
opportunity because everybody just drew in the final game.
Right.
That obviously hasn't happened. But like in the tournament regs, it's like if both players decide not to play the match for any reason, both players are awarded a draw, right? So like in theory, like I'm that's verbatim what it says.
Yeah.
Like I'm reading it right here because I went and looked up the tiebreaker thing and we can talk about that in a second. Like that is verbatim out of the tourney regs. You can decide not to play your match with your opponent. Now the TO may have something to say about that. I think I think most TOs would probably be like, that's kind of like dishonest and not in the spirit of competition and XYZ. I think that's like, I think an ethical conversation that is maybe separate from the draw thing, but is influenced by it at least. Yeah. So the tiebreakers, the strength of schedule tiebreaker that you were pointing out earlier,
yep,
is not actually to determine the outcome of the game.
It's to determine the ranking after the game.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it is only really applicable in a Swiss style system where people are not immediately knocked out.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I suppose you could technically use it gets funky after a cut, right? Like do you continue with SOS after a cut? Like I guess you would probably have to outline that in the tournament regulation stuff.
Yeah, and I think the fact that LSO was essentially Swiss with the top 8, I think made it so that was possible. Although I guess it could have got really awkward if like no, because they were the last 2 players without a loss, and anyone with a loss would have a lower tournament score. So I think the only reason it even worked in that situation is because there were only 2 players left.
Sure.
Whereas, you know, if it was like the top 4 and you had a situation where a draw was possible, you know, like that starts to get super awkward because, you know, then if both games draw, then like, you know,
things get real weird real fast.
Yeah, things start to get super weird.
Yeah.
The point is, you know, you referenced some other systems where draws are a thing that are just like normal and possible. Is Magic one of those?
Magic is one. I think in Magic it's I don't know. Magic is a little bit in Magic you have to have a draw system in place because it's best 2 out of 3 and sometimes you hit time limits and like nobody can actually, like sometimes you just like can't finish game 3. They're 50-minute rounds and you have to complete 3 games within the time period, and if you know it goes 1-1 and then you're like finishing the 3rd game and it goes to time, there's like a similar situation with like 15 minutes to hard dice down, etc. But at the end of like hard dice down, if nobody has won the 3rd game, it is a draw. And at least that's how it was like 10 years ago. It might be different now. I haven't played competitive Magic in a really long time, but I don't think it would change probably because it was a pretty good system. But I think maybe more to the point, like running a 3-hour game and having it be a draw is also like not the greatest feeling. That's kind of my point,
right?
Like I think all of the systems that where like draws are like acceptable outcomes, the game length is like somewhere in the half-hour to an hour range.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's one or the other, right? It's the game length or the number of games that are played, right? Like the more games that are played, the more acceptable draws are because
the records get diluted more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
and so it's an interesting concept. I just it's interesting. I guess maybe it depends too, because I think it's the more competitive the tournament is, the more likely of that is to happen.
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
yeah, because I would say, like, in tournaments where they're kind of competitive but not super competitive, I haven't seen a single draw, like, in I but that's a small sample size, right? I'm not saying I'm not, but and I would guess that most people out there in listening to us right now are like, what? I've never even seen a draw, like, you know what I mean? And so I just wanted to contextualize it a little bit, that the higher you go up the chain, and the more, and this is a good conversation about, and something I learned along the way over the last, like, couple months, is like, oh no, I just want 800 points. Like, what am I even doing? Like, red is usually better now. Like, everything about, and that's what they
Red is
wanted,
really good right now.
right?
Yeah.
And
Is it? I mean,
What?
should blue? Is it too hot takey to say that blue should just get tiebreak back?
So I think blue should get tiebreak back, but
Yeah.
not for these reasons. I think blue should get tiebreak back because it's actually like really awkward to put like sabotage the moisture evaporators and hostage exchange in your deck if you're not 800. I think it's like it's actually actively bad most of the time. And I think that is, I think, the case whether draws are possible or not, really, but I think that yeah, that's like a
Yeah.
blue not winning ties on victory points just makes the objectives not work the way
Yeah.
they were intended to. I think.
And I don't know about you guys, but what I've seen is, I think we're still in a transition period where people are realizing that it's changed. And it took me a while to realize that it's changed, right? Like, I had to play a number of tournaments and go, oh, what am I doing? Like, I don't need a bid.
I've run into a lot of people at competitive tournaments, even in like pretty deep into the tournament, that like they're like, "Oh, blue doesn't win ties. What do you mean?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, no,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's one of those things that like it's kind of, if you don't like read into the tournament regs and you don't like listen to people talking about it or whatever, like that's something you could easily miss in the new rules,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, it's one of those things that it'll come around with time, but I actually kind of hope that it doesn't, because I suspect this is one of the things that probably needs to change sooner rather than later. And anyways, and I actually wanted to chat about like the whole, I don't know if it was Kyle or Jay, you guys had mentioned the dice thing and whether or not that was like a good solution, I think, or like how the players responded to it or whatever.
What?
Um,
Yeah.
Rolling a dice to
So
see who wins
rolling
the
the
tie.
die.
So I actually think that I've thought about this a lot, because I've been trying to figure out like if draws remain the same, like what is the best way to do this?
Mm.
And I actually think like the dice thing is
Roll it at the
not.
start.
What's that?
Just roll it at the start.
I think you have to roll it at the start, and
Yeah.
because if you don't roll it at the start, honestly, a 50-50 chance to win the game is probably an acceptable outcome to either player if they were going to end up in a game that was like a draw situation anyways. Like if you can play a game in such a way that your likelihood at the end of the game state is to, on a coin flip, win, as opposed to putting one of your units in danger and the likelihood of it getting deleted is high. Like if you lose that unit, you've lost the game like to like an 85% chance in these mirror matchups that are like weird. It's way more acceptable to just be like, oh, I'm gonna play for the coin flip.
Yeah, and that's to say nothing too of potential like skill gaps, right? Like if one player perceives that, whoever they're playing against is significantly better than them, like a 50-50 shot might sound pretty good.
Yeah,
even if you set aside sort of the tactical, dangers that you're talking about and reducing that shot to less than 50 through gameplay decisions.
Yeah.
Like the likelihood, when you said that, like, and I don't mean this in a way where I'm good at the game, I'm fine at the game, but I've noticed, like a lot of people, just because we are on here, like when they face me, they're like, oh, I'm facing Jay from the Fifth Trooper and Scoundrels, and it's like, dude, you get me fine. I'm not that good at this game. And so like, and then but so I could definitely see them being like, well, I'm
gonna take the coin flip,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And I definitely think there are situations where I think, like, if you get a bad matchup or something and you're in a draw scenario and both players are playing really cagey and you get to like turn 4 or turn 5 and you're like, I think I can get out of this with a draw instead of like putting myself in like a 20% to win scenario. You take the draw and then flip a coin, right? So yeah, I think Kyle, I think rolling the die before, if we're gonna roll a die.
Yeah, if you're gonna roll a die, which I'm not advocating for.
Right.
I think it should happen before the game, for sure. And it at least puts us in a situation where everybody knows what needs to happen with the game. We all know at this point, if you're playing competitive Legion, what a blue player, red player, sabotage to moisture evaporators game should look like in theory. And if you don't, you can refer to one of our earlier episodes. I'm sure there are like 30 on the topic. But yeah, I don't know.
It seems like in practice, the possibility of an actual draw has, if anything, increased passive play rather than reducing it. That's at least been what I've observed.
I also think that defensive lists have also gotten a lot better, which I think has contributed to that in some way, shape, or form. Like you can actually, like, whether you're playing like a Pike spam list or like a Gar clone ball, like you can actually, if you're playing safely, navigate a game in such a way that you could be pretty sure you're not going to use a unit if you're not being aggressive.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of things contributing to that, which is like we could spend a whole nother podcast on. But one of them, I think, is that, look, I think it's good that the number of activations you need for an effective list has gone down for various reasons. But it also means that you can make lists that don't have like any fragile units in them.
Oh yeah, I play them. That's all I play now.
Right. Yeah. And I'm leaning the same way, right? Like, and it used to be that like there was a mortar or a strike team or a naked squad or something that like in a pinch you could, try and pick off to adjust that score. And it's like, when the most vulnerable thing that your opponent has is a phase 1 unit
with surging red saves,
and possible dodges, like you're not going to be able to quote unquote pick that off, right?
No.
And that was the problem I ran into in that possible draw game with the Shadow Collective list. It's like the only units I have access to are pikes, and each of these pikes can have up to 6 dodges on demand. And maybe, dodge proliferation is a completely different topic. I think it is probably separate and apart from this draw thing. But
yeah, I think it's separate, but it is contributing to the fact that the situation exists.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I think fundamentally, the whole like blue-red draw in the tournament structure conversations are linked, because the reason we have draws that are possible now is because, they removed that from being like a binary within game concrete tiebreak. And I personally think it's good in Legion that objectives are designed to be close, because close games are fun. The least fun games, and anybody that's watched like a stream game where one player just gets murdered, like close games are fun to watch. Lopsided games are not fun, and they're not fun to watch. So I think it's to Legion's credit that the games are designed to be close. I think that's a good thing, and I would not, the solution to like the whole draw thing, this is like baseball, right? Where it's like more home runs. Yay, everybody likes home runs, but more home runs means higher scores, which means higher score discrepancies, which means more moments in games that just don't matter. And back when baseball was singles and bunts and 2-2 games, like it's more exciting.
I'm sure it was.
So, so yeah, I'm not saying that we need objectives with bigger score possibilities. I think that would be totally counterproductive in the fun department. but yeah, it's, I mean, the tiebreak essentially puts Legion on a different foundation, right? It's like a game that was designed for PC and trying to port it over to a console, and like none of the controls make sense. It's like, I don't know if anyone's ever played like an RTS on a console.
I used to back in the day. It's different.
Yeah, that's a
aim assist was really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. But RTS, not FPS.
Oh, RTS.
Yeah, real-time
like
strategy.
the StarCraft.
Yeah.
RTS. I have played that. It's really bad.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? It's like, taking the objectives and removing the tiebreak system that they were constructed on is just kind of like, it's kind of like that, right? You're taking something from its original foundation and moving it to a different one. And yeah, it doesn't work as well.
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, what has been removed from the game by the introduction of draws is that there is no longer a defined aggressor in a game state anymore, in every game state. Before, there was always somebody, regardless of where you're at in the game. It was clear, if both players knew what was going on, that one person had one specific person was in a position where they had to make a play in order to progress the game state into like its next phase. And right now, there are situations where it is very unclear who is in that seat, because no one technically is.
Right. So I guess my thoughts as we're talking through this, right, is that I'm glad change is happening, because I think it's getting us closer to like the desired outcome. Mm-hmm. Because back then, like, I mean, there was some of those that felt really bad where you were like, I have to be the aggressor, like, and I'm going to get chewed up. And if I have to do something, and if I don't do something, then I lose, and there was definitely times back then, especially VAP's blue player VAP, right? Yep. Where like, or KP. Yeah. Where like you had to do something, and and that's a different strategy, but maybe you're not built for that. Maybe your list isn't built for that. But in any case, I'm encouraged that we're getting closer to a resolution that's more fair. I think we're not there yet, and this may be overcorrected in the other way, right? And I think my guess is some of the problems trying to solve were the deep bids people were taking for a while, right? Well, this definitely solved that. And so like, you're not seeing that as much anymore. You're not, there's some positives out of it. I just think like just a little adjustments could get it back to like a really good place.
Yeah, I feel like bids were already going down / relatively minimal before the tiebreak change.
They were, yes. Well, because the swap, the red blue swap, right?
The table side, the 4-card flip.
Yeah, that affected it.
Both of those helped considerably.
Yeah. So. And I think, obviously it's not as clearly defined now, but like when army points values are not equal, generally like red player, and I'm going to put red player in quotations because often the person who has the higher number list ends up being red player, wins ties in that situation, right? Yeah. And that has also made it so that like, because you win ties and because of the choice, you get to pick table side, you get to have the last bit veto in turn 0, and you win ties,
and you get the last deployment,
and you get the last deployment if the activations are equal.
You get the second deployment.
Right. Yeah. Red is really strong with all these changes, like so strong that I would venture to say, and this might be getting super off topic, that it is like far more desirable than to be blue. or to like be sub 800.
So I can speak to this. My experience in this lately has been, I picked a list that had a bid, and I was playing Yoda, and I had a bit of a bid in it. Yeah, I really like Yoda. I know we're gonna talk about that, but anyways, I played a little bit of a bid because it was like a lot around Tempest and stuff. I was more worried about a Tempest or like a heavy like vehicle list that I would want to be able to choose blue or red. Having that choice was going to help me dictate the game, so we could pick my deck versus their deck, just so I was had a better chance. But the more I played, the more I was realizing, oh, it doesn't even actually matter. I need to just go red because it's just way better.
Well, and I think
because I could bail. You're right with that choice. You bail yourself out of any like card lineup situation. It's just
Well, and it's a combination of, okay, I not only do I get the ban and the thing, but that are from red player, but I also am winning breakers, which like even if your opponent decides that they're red, if you're still using their battle deck if you're using your battle deck and you're winning ties, they're pretty screwed because you've got all the things that go to ties on in your battle deck.
and you brought more stuff.
And you brought more stuff, right?
Right. I think that's something that gets lost in the bidding conversation is like, for people that hate bidding, it's look, when you bid, you take less stuff
right
to the table, right? Like you've got fewer upgrades. You've got like you're essentially, you're not leaving those points. You're spending those points on pregame advantages, basically.
Yeah.
And your opponent is spending them on units. So the people that are like, well, why not just bid for red player? It's like, well, then you're spending points to, like give your opponent the battle deck choice, which if you're spending points to do that, like battle deck is still important, especially for certain lists.
Yep.
But it's definitely become a situation where like, unless you have a really specific idea for like an objective skew, and usually now this involves speeders, since payload and VAPs are basically off the table as like objectives that you want to play, period, regardless of what your list type is. If you've got a speeder skew, like Blizzard Force is the perfect example, right? Then you might still want to bid.
Yep.
But anything else, like why wouldn't you just go straight to 800? And if you get your deck, fine. If you don't, also fine, because all the other red player stuff is great. So I don't know. Frankly, every non-Blizzard Force list that I make is 800 points.
I'm going to be honest. I think Blizzard should go to 800 now. I think with the changes with the increase in cost to most of Blizzard's units and the fact that it can't get to 10 activations, I think it's much less good at like breakthrough and bomb and run. In a way that
breakthrough specifically is
breakthrough specifically is significantly less good, and because of that, it disincentivizes, like it devalues the battle deck. Right before, you were like, I've got 4 good objectives and they're all really good, but as soon as one of them isn't, and someone can decide whether or not you're playing it that isn't you, that turns into a situation where bidding's not so great anymore.
Yep. Yeah, because red player has a lot more control over which of the 4 objectives you end up playing. So if one of those 4 objectives is a weak objective for you, that's the one you're going to end up playing. And then why are you bidding?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like you have to have an objective deck that is like a solid 4. Yeah, half the time maybe you'll get lucky and it'll fall in the right slot that red player can't ban to it. But you want to flip a coin on that? Because I don't.
Right. Yeah, me either. And with Blizzard specifically and speeder lists in general, a lot of it too used to be that you were like bidding for the deployments so that you could flank with speeders. But now that like flanking isn't really a thing anymore, and like the way to deny cover is to just charge the speeders directly at their target until they're so close that they're touching whatever the other target is behind. Like getting battle lines or disarray is still helpful, but it's not it's not worth spending the points to bid on like it used to be.
Yeah.
Because whether you're coming at them from a side angle or not, you're not going to get that flanking shot that you were getting before. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're right about Blizzard should also just not be bidding.
I
But
don't.
I have not made a non 800 point list, I think, in 3 consecutive tournaments at least, if not longer at this point.
Yeah.
So
It's such a weird mentality to get into, because
I don't mind it.
no, I don't mind
well,
it
but
either.
you've
It's
always
just,
made 800 point lists, Mike.
well, and I always, and back to like our earlier, like I always felt like I was making concessions, and like, I mean, you guys have seen it on the podcast where I'll make a list of like, and I have 12 points, like, and I'm so excited that like and I could do all this stuff still, and now it's just like, oh, I don't need to like be that excited about it anymore. I can just, just go all the way to 800. But I think this is another example of the intentions are good, but I think like some other things in this transition from FFG to AMG, they just pull a lot of switches, and they're not like, I think I would like to see in the future with this game when rules changes come or edits or just like when something's not working, it's okay to just pull one switch and just see if that evens it out versus pulling 5 switches. You know what I mean? Um,
Um,
like my okay, like I guess
I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm
like
picking up what
with
you're putting
force
down.
push, right?
Yeah.
Like it was like 4 different switches that we pulled on that. Like it was like one of those would have fixed that problem.
Well,
That or force choke. Sorry, I think I'm thinking of both probably.
so I don't have a problem with the number of switches and stuff being pulled. I think what I've seen with some other games lately that I've really liked and that I think um I would like to see in like that vein is I don't care how many changes you make.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what your goal is. I want to know what the goal of the change you're making
Mm.
it is so that we can understand where you're trying to get to, and we can as a community give you feedback on whether A, that's something we think is good or bad for the game, and B, whether the changes that you're making are actually achieving the thing that you're trying to get to. Because
Yep.
the way that I'm feeling about it is that I don't really know what the objective is. And look, I'm not a game developer, so that's not really my my job, but um it feels like the things that are being changed are kind of like there's no clear objective in a lot of these
Mm.
situations. It's not clear where we're trying to get.
There
And
are some cases where if that is clear, the change doesn't get it there.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
kind of like, if there is a clear objective, like the change isn't actually accomplishing the thing. So like we'd like to give you feedback on, hey, maybe you could do it this way instead of the way that we're doing it whenever you update it next time. And I'm sure that they like talk to their testers and stuff about that sort of thing. But I think just from like a community rollout, when I've seen a lot of these games, like when they patch a game, they're like, hey, this is what we're trying to do. We've tried it out in testing. We think it's going to work. This is what we're trying to accomplish with it. Right. And I think that would go a long way for us to like understand what like all of these like turn zero draw changes are trying to fix or whatever. Cause like they obviously didn't make changes without a goal. Right. Like
Yep.
there was some sort of goal, whether it was, you know, intentional or implied or whatever. Like you don't make changes generally because you were
Yeah.
happy with because you were
Or
happy
by
with how it
mistake
worked
or
before.
whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like somebody said something at some point that was like that led to changing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Well, I think with this in particular, there's some direct changes that like the red versus blue, right? Like they were trying to even that out. That was clear. But then I think what happened with like the draw system, I think that was a different thing that just had unintended consequences that stacked onto the things they've already changed about what red and blue privileges are when they come to a game. And then when you add on a draw system that, and ties, then you're like, well, oh, you didn't I see what you're trying to do with each, but you're not looking at it holistically. You're looking at them as two different things, and that's how we got to where we are today with this conversation, right? Is that it just so happened and they both it comes to a head.
Yeah,
Because I'm sure that the question was like, well, how often is a draw gonna happen? And they're like, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's happening that often in testing or whatever, so I think it's okay that once in a while we have a draw and this is how we approach it. And then but then also at the same time this red versus blue is happening, and then you're starting to realize, oh, red's better, so now so now draws are happening more often because now
everybody's
it
800.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
and really, like, because I've seen a lot of people be like, well, how often do you actually tie on kill points? And the answer is every time, every game. We've talked about this before, but every game
right,
starts tied.
Yeah.
well, if you're both at 800.
Sure, but I mean, like on kill points, right? If you're not both at 800, then whoever's got less of a bid is the one that starts out the game with the status quo in their favor, right? Because you see this a lot where people are like, well, that seems super unlikely that you would actually tie on kill points, and the most common tie is 0-0.
Yep.
Every game starts that way, and now there's a lot of games that are ending that way.
And
because of this awkward, like, the both players afraid to do anything situation. So
and I'd even go farther to say that in a lot of these matchups where like draws are happening, like there are a lot of clone matchups because clone units are hard to kill.
Yeah.
Like the units oftentimes are the same cost. like
Yeah.
there are a lot of units in both lists
Mhm.
that are the same exact points cost. Is it like so if you trade, like you're still in the same situation, right? And so that also creates kind of like a weird thing, and that like in the situation where this is most applicable, they're generally very, very tight mirror situations.
Even when they're not mirror list, there's a lot of units that are kind of in like that 70 to 80 points cost range, depending
Yep.
on what upgrade you give them and stuff. And even if it's not a mirror, like there's a good chance your units could be the same cost,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, and that kill points like I've found in close games, way even when there is like a lot of killing back and forth, it's way closer than you ever think it is.
Yep.
And because you're like trying to do the mental math. Like, I mean, I'm sure we've all gotten to the end of the game and going, whoa, I knew I was ahead. I didn't know I was only 5 points ahead. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no,
Like,
totally.
oh my gosh, that was
Yeah.
way closer. But yeah.
Yeah, I've
Anyways,
seen games where each player kills like 4 to 5 units, and somebody wins by like 10 points or less.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, we should move on.
Okay.
Because as much as I want to talk about Wookiees, I want to talk about Yoda more.
Okay.
So if we don't get to Wookiees, and we
Well,
have to do that on another cast.
Yeah, Mike will be back next week.
That's
There
right.
you go.
Yeah. So Mike,
Yeah.
I am I have this friend,
Mhm.
and this friend is a very good force user player, but has always been afraid to try Yoda because every list that this friend makes with Yoda just doesn't look beefy enough for my friend.
And his
Hercules.
name is Dial Cornboss.
I'm talking about Hercules Rockefeller today. Come on, my good friend
sorry.
Hercules.
Your other friend, right. I
Yeah.
forgot you had to.
So what should I tell this friend about why he should try Yoda?
So I have a couple upfront things that I think we need to get out of the way in reference to Yoda.
Okay.
I play Yoda very differently than I think the majority of people have up until the last few months.
But I also think you play Yoda how Hercules would play Yoda.
I think I do too. So I think Hercules is gonna love it. But there's some qualifiers that I think are relevant to the conversation.
Okay.
The first is that I believe you have to take Padme.
Okay.
And so the main issue that I've had with Yoda up until the last like 2.5 months is that on every turn that is not a luminous being's turn, surge tokens are a problem.
Yep.
They're a huge problem. Like, I can't even begin to announce how big of a problem it is not being able to. First of all, you've got less dudes in your army, so you need to make everybody count in comparison to a normal Gar army, which means it's more vital in this army than other Gar armies that you're able to like globally share your surges, right? That's something Anakin has going for him at all times.
Yep.
So a lot of people have come to me and they're like, well, why aren't you taking Chewie? And I'm like, well, he doesn't share surge tokens. And that slot is basically Padme. Additionally,
Quick question real quick while we're on that topic.
Yeah, fire away.
Do you play Padme's 3-pip for the surge?
Almost always.
Okay.
Almost always turn one.
Okay.
Unless it's like a very aggressive game state, in which you don't have time. But unlike the Anakin Padme list, where you like can't really play Padme's 3-pip until like turn 3 or 4.
Yep.
You know, playing it like as if you were playing Hero of the Clone Wars in a Yoda list, very reasonable to do.
Yep. Okay. Sorry, continue.
No, you're good. You're good. And
yep.
On the topic of Padme's command cards, as long as you're including her, I've actually taken to playing probably roughly 2 to 3 of them a game, and kind of leaving the cycling of Yoda's command cards by the wayside for the most part. I generally will cycle and play Luminous twice because it's a busted ass card. But
yep.
Anyways, so this is all to say that I think Chewie is real bad and you can't take him. Padme is the key.
That's a strong statement.
No, I don't think it is.
Well,
I mean, maybe it's a strong statement, but I do think that it's true.
Okay, so I want to make one point relative to Yoda lists because, as you said, you play Yoda very differently than most people play Yoda.
Yes.
I think there is another way besides your way. I think the quote unquote standard way to play Yoda, where you're using him in an objective skew list, is still a good and effective way to play Yoda. And that version of Yoda has won plenty of tournaments over the last year as well. And that version of Yoda takes Chewie.
It does. I think for all the aforementioned reasons that we've been talking about for like the last hour, that list is a lot worse these days.
That's fair. I'm just saying that we're talking about 2 completely different versions of Yoda lists. There's one that essentially like punts attrition and is like, I'm not going to try and win this gunfight. I'm just going to murder you on objectives with Yoda teleporting all over the table. Yes. And that's the Yoda Chewie list.
That is they're fundamentally different archetypes, and yes. Yoda functions as a completely different character in both lists.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say that Chewie is bad, but he is definitely bad for the type of Yoda list that you're going for.
Okay. I'll give you that. I think he's bad generally.
Okay.
But
that's fair.
He's a white save dude in your red save army that like has to get aggressive. I don't like him. He dies too easy. Anyways.
Okay.
So we've got Padme. I also have started taking force guidance on Yoda, again, to solve the issue with the surge problems. On the non-luminous turns, and frankly it's pretty good on luminous too, because you get 2 global surges as opposed to just 1 from it. An upgrade definitely that I thought was pretty bad before, and I'm pretty much it's stapled to all my Yodas now. Anyways, to get to the TLDR of it, if I was trying to sell Hercules Rockefeller on this list, this is how I would stitch it.
Okay.
This list plays like Anakin Padme Pikes, except you just take Anakin out and you put Yoda in. And I know that doesn't seem like a 1-for-1.
Yeah, that doesn't compute on the
I know
way.
that it doesn't compute.
Yeah.
And I know that the points don't add up that way, but it feels the same when you put it on the table from like how stable it is. And it's far more killy. And you don't have to charge, like you actually have a bunch of command cards that do things, like good things,
really good things.
Yeah, they're not even they're ballpark silly things, right? And yeah, it feels the same, except you actually have a character. Like if you're just replacing Yoda with Anakin, and basically it's Anakin Padme, except it's Yoda Padme, and it's just better. There are some differences. You're obviously not taking pikes. It is less defensive. It is far more the Yoda lists that we're talking about are much more keyed in on actually killing things than just like staying alive. It can do both very well. But Luminous generally allows you to, the amount of times I've said, yeah, that's going to be 14 Pierce 1 after cover and dodges the last 2 months is high. And when you say that to your opponent, the first thing that happens is it breaks their spirit. The second thing that happens is they take their unit off the table.
So how are you setting this up? Walk us through.
Yeah. So generally on the Luminous turns. So Luminous, for those that are not aware, this card at the beginning of the turn puts 2 aim tokens, 2 dodge tokens, and 2 surge tokens on Yoda, and he can share them with everybody. It's kind of like Anakin's. I even used to do this. I used to compare Anakin to Yoda and being like, Anakin's just luminous beans every turn, and like that's what he is. And that's not really true. It's an easy comparison to make, but Anakin has to use his entire activation to do it. And he has to actually go to get the tokens, which means that like you're sacrificing tempo. Yoda doesn't. He immediately gets the tokens. In addition to that, he gives your entire army face-ups. Often I fire support 2 to 3 times on Luminous turns. And I'm fire supporting arcs in all of the scenario, arcs or Padme, depending on how close the opponent is, which means that all of the fire supports have Sharpshooter and Pierce attached to them. So we're talking about pools that are somewhere between 12 and 20 dice that have Sharpshooter 1 or Sharpshooter 2 and Pierce attached. And at a minimum, they've got 2 aim token and 2 surge tokens backed up, in addition to the aim token that they're getting from the Arcs Tactical and any other aim tokens that you may have picked up. If you don't need to sacrifice tempo, or rather you have the tempo to like stock up on stuff before you take your shots, you've got face ups on everything. So you just immediately go with Padme, aim quick thinking, then you go with Yoda, and Yoda allows you to do a couple things. He allows you to move units into positions where you get their full dice pool on fire support with guidance, A. Or B, if you don't need to do that, Yoda just takes an aim and then he guidances Padme to quick thinking again and puts another 2 aim tokens on the table. And
that's
now
a lot of tokens.
It's a lot of tokens. So if you're already set up, great. You just have like, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 aim tokens before any clone shared aim tokens or aim tokens from tactical. It's not hard to basically get 8 aim tokens set up for your first shot, and chances are you don't need them all, so you can use them for the other shots. I've said on some other podcasts that this list feels a little bit like Rexstar because of how this is set up. This is what we used to do in Rexstar, except it took you all the way until the end of the turn to get 8 aim tokens, not
immediately.
And often you didn't have Sharpshooter or Pierce attached to the shots in Rexstar. They were just Z6s.
They were Z6s.
They were just Z6 shots, and they were kind of capped at 10 or 11. These shots are not just Z6 shots. They're arc shots, fire supported by Z6 shots, and they're capped at 20 with Pierce.
So I want to be clear, just for everybody at home, you're talking about full arc squads.
I am, yes.
Just to, because for a second there, I was trying to go, I'm like 20, and I was like, oh, full arc squads. It took me a second to get there. So yeah.
So if you're fire supporting a range 3 arc shot, you've got 16 dice. If you're fire supporting a range 2 arc shot, you've got 20, assuming that you haven't lost bodies. which maybe you do, and you're down to like 17 dice or something.
Only 17 dice.
I one of my there was a tournament over the weekend, and one of my arcs stepped up, and I fired the range 2 pool into one unit, fire supported it, and then I fired the sniper into something else and fire supported that, and I threw like, I don't know, like 34 dice or something in one activation with like 6 or 7 aim tokens.
Can you still split fire support?
I'm pretty sure you can.
Okay.
If not, then I messed up big time, but I'm pretty sure you can. Anywho, are you rules checking me right now?
I was thinking about it.
Okay,
You
do
should.
it. Let's
You
make
do
sure.
it to me all the
Okay.
time. Just because
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Mike, you shouldn't stop now.
Damn straight.
Yeah.
I know you can't fire support beam attacks, but I'm pretty sure you can fire support like you can fire support each one on gunslinger, so I don't, are those technically separate? And I believe they're separate attack pools.
Gunslinger is separate attack pools. Yeah.
Now you've got me rethinking things. But anyways, even if you can't do that, it's still really strong.
Don't back down, Mike. Don't back
down. I'm not gonna back down.
You are
it's
right.
Silly list. Anyways,
I think it's still okay. I'd have to like dig into the forums. The wording is a little awkward because now like the whole thing with split firing and attacks, it's worded differently than it used to, but it's looks like it's possible to me still. So
anywho, so that's like the generic big scary thing you can do with the list. You don't need to really do that to win though. Guidance is just a hell of a drug, man. So I played Yoda a lot before. I even remember being on here and being like, Yoda's better than Anakin, and you guys were like, Anakin's better than Yoda, and I eventually like conceded that Anakin is better than Yoda. But I'm coming back here, and I am sticking my flag in the ground, and I'm telling y'all that I should have stuck to my guns. Yoda is way better than Anakin, and it's not close. And I only figured this out because I played Anakin, in fairness, because I played him so defensively, and that led me to the Yoda lists. In fairness, Jojo Binks from the Discord really inspired me at Nova with his Yoda list. He was playing Yoda with arcs after the price decreases, and I played him at Nova with my Anakin list, and I got stomped. It wasn't close. It was brutal, and I couldn't do anything because when you get into range 3 of this Yoda list, it just pounces on you and you're dead. You just die. I don't know what else to say. It's really difficult to play into it.
So just real quick, for those of you, I did find it in the forums, and yes, a different unit may use the fire support keyword to add attack dice to each attack pool during their respective form attack pool steps.
Boom, boom, boom,
There you
boom,
go.
boom.
All right.
So that was in March.
I was
posted.
pretty sure, but man, Kyle's like, did you? And I'm like,
well, okay.
I don't know.
We're still discovering stuff.
Listen,
that's like
yeah.
different
Like
the
that's a
CRB.
deep-seated fear that we have, that like
Yeah.
we literally on a cast found out about force push with recover boxes, and we're like, wait, what? And so yeah,
But
like
it's been this way for months, Jay.
yeah, dude.
Anyways, but that is a fear I have every once in a while. Like on stream at Crucible, Austin like seized with Padme, but he had already like passed a token through with authoritative, and I like tried to stop the game. I was like, no. And like we had to like go through a whole rigmarole because like I was pretty sure it didn't work, but like hey, XYZ. Anyway,
Wait, does it work now?
It does not.
Okay.
But like it wasn't clear via the forums and stuff, and we had to like define the ruling and like a bunch of other stuff. Like it was more complicated than it needed to be. But the TLDR of it is like some things we thought were law have like sort of changed over the last 8 months, and like changed without much notice.
Right. Yeah.
And it was just like one of those situations. So anyways, I talking about Yoda, like I don't know how to like really talk about the intricacies of like how the list operates, because it, basically guidance is the whole thing. And it's really hard to like talk about like exactly how it operates, because it really depends on the circumstances you're in, but guidance kind of just allows you to break the rules of the game at all points.
So you're using Yoda more like Palpatine in this situation, where he's for tokens, he's for support, he's for giving other units extra actions. And if he ends up, Palpatine is not a great example because of an ally you will die, but I'd wager that you end up attacking with Yoda significantly less than most Yoda players.
I definitely I only play as one pip generally like once a game, unless we're playing hostage. I will play it on turn 1 to double move the hostage back to me via double guidance. So I'll move the hostage 4 times turn 1, and then I'll aggressive negotiations on turn 2 to move it again if I need to. And then it can, obviously do its thing, but that's like way out of Vader's might range and shenanigans like that. But yeah, I generally don't attack with Yoda most games, frankly. Honestly, guidancing a standby is often like way better than attacking with them anyways. I would rather attack with a 10 die pool than a 4 die pool most of the time. Generally, I have a bunch of aim tokens backing it up, so like I don't know. I think if your opponent gets close to you, you will attack with Yoda in this list. But if they're far away, you don't have burst of speed. You don't need it. But your other units are better at doing the things that are at range anyhow. And I've also found that Yoda never. One sec. I'm like fact checking myself in my head. Since I started playing this list, Yoda has not died.
Well, if he's in the back telling people what to do, then that makes sense.
That makes sense. Right?
Yeah, he's pretty durable, like as a rule, anyway.
Right.
So,
4 out of the 6 command cards that you have in your command hand put a dodge token on them before the turn starts. You've got Padme's 1 and 2 pip, his 3 pip, and his 2 pip. All of them put dodge tokens on the table that are either on him or that he can use because they're on Padme. Like, yeah, I don't know. He's very hard to kill. I just like, my biggest fear when running Yoda before playing this list was Yoda's gonna die. And then the game's just over because Yoda's dead. And in these lists, it's like, okay, well, if they chew through all of my clones, you know what they have to deal with? Then Yoda can go aggro. And he's done that a couple of games, but like you generally don't even get to that point. Because giving ARC troopers relentless is busted.
Pretty good.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would encourage you to try it. I would encourage everybody to try it. It seems like a lot of people have since in the last like couple weeks, and I think people are catching on to Yoda and full arcs pretty good. I do think you have to take Padme. I do think you need to make sure you have the surge tokens. I think that's the biggest thing. Even now, sometimes I run out. And that's kind of a big deal.
You ever run into suppression issues with your phase 1s?
Absolutely not.
Because they're always fire supporting?
Well, because they're fire supporting a lot of times. And if I do have a suppression issue, I just drop Padme's 1 pip. I got Master of Evil the other day, and somebody dropped like, I don't know. I already had a bunch of suppression on my units. Then they Master of Evil, and there was like 35 suppression on the table. I just dropped Padme's 1 pip, soaked up 35 suppression tokens, and then guidance her to recover. And they were all gone.
That'll do it.
Yep.
Okay, how is it against heavies? Like if you were up against a legitimate Tempest list?
So I haven't really had any trouble with armor in general. There are two versions of the list that I have played. The first one is the one that I took when I was like, people aren't going to play armor. So I just took a bunch of Z6s. The list that I normally play has 1 RPS in it for that reason. Echo fire supporting into an RPS with a bunch of aim tokens generally is like 4 or 5 crits Pierce 1. Depending on like if you've only got the rocket in your pool or you've got the full squad. And it's pretty good. In a pinch, you can fire support Yoda's force wave attack for surge crit, which is also not bad. Obviously Yoda's got to be a little bit closer. I killed an AAT in like I think 2.5 turns the other day with just arc sniper shots, fire supported by RPSs. And it didn't feel that statistically anomalous, to be honest. And the mortar's got critical 1 on it in a pinch, so you can like fire support 1 arc with an RPS, fire support the other one with the mortar. That one's got critical 1. You still get pierce, you know. And if they've taken armor, you're gonna just bludgeon their infantry. It's not even close. Yeah. So like you can also take the other tact of like, I'm just gonna kind of ignore the tank and just kill the things that actually like pick up boxes and stuff. Which is the other thing that Yoda has over Anakin, frankly, is that Yoda looks at every battle deck that Anakin's like, oh God, I don't want to play that. And Yoda's like, yeah, let's do it. You know, bombing run. Okay. No sweat, not a big deal.
Guidance goes a long way, even when you're playing quote unquote defensive Yoda, towards making almost every objective more palatable for you.
Totally. I've played breakthrough and bombing run against Blizzard, piloted by Josh Grimmer, who won Nova playing Blizzard, and it's a pretty good matchup for Yoda, to be honest. It's pretty easy to like pick up bikes and HRUs with fire supported shots at range 4 and range 3. Like they just disappear from the table if Blizzard ever decides to engage. It's scary. It's fun as hell. But I'm a little bit nervous that it's gonna end up getting. I've created a monster that's gonna get nerfed again, but we'll see.
Do you think it's a balance problem?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I definitely think it could be. I think after watching it in the wild, I definitely think that it's got a low floor if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. That's just going to be true of any Yoda list.
Yeah, I think
100%.
It's very fragile if you don't understand how all the pieces fit together. It is not a list that you're going to like pick up and be like, oh yeah, this is just going to kill everybody that walks, because like you really need to know what to spend guidance on and like what command card to play and make sure that you have the recyclable command cards that you need when you need them. So you kind of have to like understand where the game state's going to be in 4 turns. But if you understand and recognize those things, the tools that this list has available, I've just never felt in this game before. And so I think if you're willing to put in the time, the ceiling on this list is amazing. I feel confident in saying that this is the best GAR list that exists, and some variant of this list is the best GAR list that exists. It is not close. Not close at all. Whether it is like the best list that presently exists, I think is maybe a different question. Because Empire really hasn't shaken out yet, I feel like.
I agree.
And Rebels and CIS are bad. Sorry, Rebels and CIS players. I don't know what to say.
I'm not going to argue with that at the moment.
Yeah.
I think they have some good lists, but I think they each have like one to two good lists, basically. But whether those good lists are as good as their equivalent Empire or Republic counterparts is debatable.
Yeah, I would put them in like they're like solid Bs probably. You know, like I think the Cassian Ahsoka like gun line is it's fine. It's playable. Like you can definitely play good lists with it and win. And like again, I think we say it all the time, but like skill decides most Legion games, right?
Yeah.
Like regardless of list. But
Yeah.
you know, I think all things equal, yeah, I'd put them at Bs if like Blizzard is an A. I also hot take, I don't think Blizzard is very good anymore.
The hottest of takes. All right. Not bad. I like that. That's a good hot take. I mean, it's not as good as it once was.
It's definitely not as good, but I think
it's not even close to as good as it was.
Right.
No.
Right.
But I actually think it's here's what I've been preaching this.
Okay.
I hope other people follow suit. People are scared of Blizzard's bad objectives in its deck, and so they ban to the good ones. People are like, oh, I'm playing Blizzard. I should ban bombing run and breakthrough every time.
Yep.
And what ends up happening is that puts you on hostage and KP. And those are Blizzard's best objectives. You should not play Blizzard on those objectives ever.
Yep,
If
I agree
you're a
with
red
that.
player, you should not let them play those objectives. And guess what? Because of how red player works, you can make it so that you never play those objectives pretty much, unless bombing run and breakthrough are in the first two slots and the Blizzard player bans them. But generally, that doesn't happen. That's like, what is that like? What, a 1 in 25? I don't know what the odds are.
Actually, there's no situation as red player where you should have to play them, because if they're in the first two slots, you're just banning yourself.
You can ban them, right? Yeah, absolutely.
If they're in the last two slots, well,
Well,
I guess if they're in the last
two
two slots, you'd have to play one of them.
Yeah, you're gonna have to play one.
But you can also decide which one you want to play,
right?
And like depending on your list, you can figure that out. Chances are you'd probably rather play KP than hostage, but I think it depends.
It depends on your list.
Depends. Yeah.
But seriously, people, play more bombing run. Blizzard's actually like not very good at it if you know what you're doing. Like it's fine, but like it is a playable game, and it is reasonable.
So is breakthrough if you have at least 9 activations.
Yes, you know, they have to get aggressive, or it's weird. Anyways, that is to say, those are the two objectives that I think people are like actively avoiding, so that they end up playing into Blizzard's hands most of the time. They're like, I don't have speeders, I can't play the speeder objectives. You know, like
as somebody that played a lot of Blizzard.
Oh, you?
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely confirm that people are scared of those, and I was totally fine with that.
Yeah. You're like, oh, yay.
So, yeah. And that was almost half the point of including them in the deck. Like,
totally.
Sure, you're still okay with those because you have speeders, and speeders are good at them. But you know, you're definitely not leveraging Vader to his maximum potential on either of those objectives. And really, that's what the list is all about. Well, and it's a delivery mechanism for Vader. So
I think that's just a good cautionary tale, because like I was playing the Yoda triple barks list, a version of Yoda, and doing triple barks, and people were doing the same thing, and I was like, okay, I'll take KP.
Like, right. Yeah. Right. Like,
just because you didn't want bombing run. Okay.
Yep. You know,
don't get me wrong. Bombing run can really suck against a good speeder player.
Yep.
But because you need to know how to play it, or you will just get crushed on it.
Well, that's the thing, right? You know, most people that are like, I've got like 2 bombing run reps ever, you know, because they're avoiding it the whole time. And I would encourage people to face the music on this one and just play some bombing run. Just play some practice bombing run. Don't even go through turn 0 with your opponent if you practice games. Just like set up bombing run games and play them.
Yep.
Just so that you start to like, once you get the tempo for like when you need to like be dropping bombs and getting away from them so they don't kill your own units and stuff like that, like it'll start to feel like, oh, this is reasonable. Because what the Blizzard player at 9 activations is not doing is driving their bombs into you these days. Like, that's never going to happen in 9 acts. They're
Yeah,
going
you're
to
not going to
go.
sacrifice a bike to do that.
Yeah, they're going and dropping them in the safest corner of the board they can find, which means the bikes are out of the fight for like the first 2-ish turns. And you can sort of take advantage of that if you're kind of don't understand what is going to be happening, because they're not going to get those bikes involved in the fight until they drop the bombs. Which means you can kind of take on the Vader and the HRUs a little piecemeal at the beginning of the game if you're able to set up that opportunity.
There are some combinations you should avoid in that situation. Probably the biggest one is like disarray bombing run, simply because the bikes can do the bomb dropping thing and also kill one of your units at the same time, thus putting them ahead on the tie breaks.
And I guess that's what I was kind of, when you guys were saying, you know, sometimes you don't have the choice because blue player used their first 2 vetoes to get to the ones. Well, then you used your vetoes to do a more advantageous deployment so that you're not like in that, like, you're not going to veto to disarray. That would be crazy.
Yeah.
Right. You know, you would do something that's more advantageous to you, like Long March or something. You know, if they have that, they wouldn't have that. But
danger close,
danger
often
close.
they have in there. That's gonna So, all right. Well, I will relay. Actually, I'll just tell Hercules to listen. I'm sure he'll be interested. So I know that Hercules has always wanted to.
He's always wanted to win one of our giveaways. There's a lot of things Hercules Rockefeller has wanted over the years.
Yeah, has never actually won any of those things though, so I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, I'll let him know to listen this week. We can definitely table Wookiees for next time. So sorry for those people that were looking and excited to hear about Wookiees.
Yeah,
but we've got lots to talk about Wookiees, and we've got weeks to talk about it.
Yeah, so plenty of time.
We have months.
I think this was a really interesting and encouraging talk for me. A couple episodes ago, I brought up a tournament I was at, and the guy who won it, Isaac, he was playing clones, and he was just dumping like no less than 14 to like 18 dice into me, and it was an utter shock to me. And he wasn't even playing Yoda, like he was playing a Cody list, right? I was just going, I'm sorry, what is happening right now? Like, how is this even? You know, and getting most of that over cover, like, and I'm just like, dude, like, this is crazy. So yeah, that was a really that was a great talk. I'm very excited, Mike. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no sweat. I mean, I do think that it's possible that like I think Republic outside of like the Anakin Padme lists are like leaning into the fire sport shenanigans more and more now. Yeah, I think it's possible that there's some systemic things that maybe, I don't know. I just like don't want my boys to get nerfed again. You know, I feel like they break all the rules of the game, and they've gotten nerfed like 4 or 5 times in the past, and I just like I don't want it to happen again. But it also like doesn't feel super fair. So I don't know.
Well, and I think fire support has seen its value go up just based on the fact that more fights have become much more just straight up about that range 3 gunfight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because flanking's devalued, playing the objectives or objective skews have been devalued. So it used to be that you could just kind of stay outside that range 3 danger zone of the phase 1s and like pick and poke and play the objectives, but that's a lot harder to do now because it's much more like, you know, armies crash into each other kind of setup, and that's going to favor a situation where like you want to be at range 3.
Yeah. Well, and I think to boot, going back to your favorite topic ever, since everything's in cover now, it's actually significantly more advantageous to fire support, because fire support is like gifting the unit that's fire supporting sharpshooter 2, and then if you're fire supporting arcs, it's like all of a sudden your shot has removed cover from 2 units instead of 1, right? So it's almost like, you know, I think my last Wookiee opponent was like, I was like hurtling across heavy cover with dodge tokens and armor 1 on my shield guys, and I felt really good about it until you started fire supporting me with, you know, 18 die pools, and all of a sudden my armor 1 only counted once for each shot, and my my cover was gone. The white saves don't hold up super well.
They sure don't.
I guess to that point too, like things that have defensive tech that only triggers like per attack, so like low profile or armor 1, right? Like instead of it counting twice, you're only counting it once. Which there's more of that these days, so it is a bigger deal. Danger sense, again, only like if you're shooting into pikes, it's much better to shoot into a pike squad with 20 dice once than 10 dice twice, right? Because they'll trigger danger sense multiple times. So there's just, I think, an additive reasons for kind of leaning into that, not just in the Yoda lists, but in like I think that goes across factions as a whole. Like the moment of consideration play out of Gideon, I actually think is like pretty good for that reason now too. I don't know. Does it give 3 units fire support that turn? I don't remember.
Yeah,
it's 3 core or 1 heavy.
And if you're running a short trooper list, you realize
heavies.
those 3 orders to mortars, and then you potentially got 6.
Yep.
Giving your mortars like sure. I mean, they're mostly crit engines, but like
sure,
it's still, there is value in that, and I think as we have entered a more cover dense environment in Legion, things that kind of circumvent the cover rules altogether have gotten a lot stronger. This is just an evolution of that.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting, and we'll see how this conversation continues to evolve. But clone's good, Yoda good, and I still think Anakin Padme is one of the best lists, just relative to other factions.
I think so too. That list is much harder to kill than the Yoda lists. The thing that the Anakin Padme lists don't do super well is like kill other stuff. Like they don't
force opportunities.
They don't force opportunities, right? Like guidance allows you to, like, even if your opponent's being super cagey, they kind of can't avoid being caught in a situation that is bad for them, because you're just going to put them in it if they're not in it already, right? Like if you hold Yoda and a couple units until like the tail end of a turn, like they're going to have to activate something that you're eventually going to be able to put within a range 4 fire support. And if they're not, they're just not playing the game, you know? Yeah. And if they're not playing the game, great. Right.
Sure.
I mean, great for you, not them, but
guidance really lets you, with those out of activation moves, circumvent the normal zoning that is the standard counter to fire support.
So
interesting. All right, I'll have to try it. I've got the arcs paint. I mean,
you mean Hercules?
Sorry, yes, Hercules. I understand that Hercules just recently painted his arcs. So.
But you know what the problem is?
But I will also have to try it, because in listening to this conversation, you've also piqued my interest. So
okay.
That's been the problem too. Like I've got all the clones, a good chunk of the clones painted. So every time you guys bring up clones lists, I'm like, yeah, I could play that right now without even having to paint a single model. Great.
I'd have to paint Yoda, but otherwise I could play it.
Yeah.
Yoda's an easy paint. Yep. I will say I gotta give some criticism here. Those flight stands are the worst things in the world. I had one break on me yesterday. I've cannibalized all my flight stands out of my unassembled Mando boxes, whether they be Shadow Collective or Rebels. And because the issue that I have is that once they break, you can't re-glue them. Yeah.
I had the same issue with Maul's probes.
I
didn't use the flight stands at all on the arcs. I had them jumping off boxes. I learned from everyone else's miserable experiences there. So I cut up some boxes from Vital Assets, and I just put them on their bases and had them jumping off at various angles.
I don't want to take the time to go through that, but now that they're so good, kind of here's a hot take. I know that we're trying to end, and we'll get there. Fun. But I actually don't think arcs are very good. I think the only reason they're good is because they've got all the synergy around them. I think if like arcs on their own are not a 97 point unit. With all of the power up stuff, it makes them worth their points. But it's like a weird. The more that like we see like Republic stuff shake out, the more it's like, how do you actually cost these units effectively and make them like fair? Because like in any other faction, I think you wouldn't ever take the arcs because they're too expensive.
I agree. But it's it's the synergy faction. It's always been a challenge.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
For sure. Just food for thought. Anyhow.
Good food.
Good food. Very Legion.
All right.
Super
Well,
Legion.
we are the Notorious Scoundrels. I'm Kyle.
I'm Jay.
And I'm Mike.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Yep.
He forgot what it was. He was gonna say something and then he forgot what the catchphrase was. So he just
completely dropped out of my head.
Yeah,
something about mats.
Yeah, something about mats.
Yeah, blah 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 fruit. Bye bye.